There have been a lot of teams and a lot of cities in the National Hockey League. We've seen them throughout the continent, but these are 8 cities that were close to either getting their first National Hockey League franchise or were close to returning to the greatest hockey league in the world. The first city on this list is Baltimore. Baltimore was almost awarded a team in the Great Expansion of 1967 as one of the front-running cities. It seemed like the American Hockey League's Baltimore Clippers were in a position of getting an NHL franchise. However, Ed Snyder, a businessman who was a part owner of the Philadelphia Eagles, helped form a group and had the cash assets to make a proposal on behalf of the city of Philadelphia. The NHL selected Philadelphia, who got their deposit on time, and formed the Philadelphia Flyers. With the addition of the Washington Capitals in 1974, along with the Flyers, both of whom are in relatively close proximity to Baltimore, it's very unlikely the city would ever receive an NHL franchise as of this recording. Next on the list is the city of Seattle. In 1974, the Seattle Totems of the Western Hockey League, not to be confused with the Major Junior League of the same name, was awarded an NHL franchise conditionally with the city of Denver. The league lost 2 of its principal members and thus folded in the summer of 1974. But what happened to the potential Seattle or Denver expansion teams? The cost of ownership was uniquely high for the Seattle group. They had to pay back their deposit, franchise fee, and since they were the owner of a minor league team, they had to buy back shares that were owned by the Vancouver Canucks. The Seattle group could have also acquired the Pittsburgh Penguins, who will come up again in this video, for far less money. By 1975, it was all over, and the NHL pulled back their expansion agreement with the Seattle group. Since then, Seattle has put themselves in positions not to get an NHL team. Key Arena, the largest arena in the city, has bad sightlines for hockey and wasn't suitable for professional sports generally by the mid-2000s. As of this recording, there have been talks of constructing an arena in the city or in its suburbs. Even with those considered talks, there is a wait and see approach. Next on the list is Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. Ralph Arena, the pet food company based in St. Louis, bought the Blues in 1977 and were hemorrhaging money by the 80s. They didn't even make a draft selection in 1983, the same draft year that had LaFontaine, Yzerman, Neely, Hasek, and Makarov. Ralph Arena tried to get rid of the team as quickly as possible, and by 1983 they sold it to Bill Hunter, who attempted to move the team to Saskatoon. The NHL ended up vetoing it, opting to keep the team in a much larger market, and sold it to Harry Ornest. The Blues were eventually past their financial woes by the late 80s, and since, Saskatoon has only been a minor conversation in regards to an NHL franchise. The next city on this list is Kansas City, Missouri. And yes, I know the NHL used to have a team in Kansas City. They were called the Kansas City Scouts. And after a myriad of circumstances, including an economic recession in the United States that began around the same time the Scouts entered the NHL, they moved to Denver in 1976. The team, dubbed the Colorado Rockies, moved to New Jersey in 1982, where they still are the New Jersey Devils. Since then, Kansas City has came close to returning to the National Hockey League. In 2007, Kansas City opened the Sprint Center, an NHL-capable facility, and around that time, the Pittsburgh Penguins were trying to climb out of a financial hole. Phil Anschutz of Anschutz Entertainment Group, who also owned the Los Angeles Kings, wanted the Penguins to be a primary rent-free tenant. However, around the same time, the Penguins were offered a 30-year lease on their current home, PPG Paints Arena. Kansas City still has a shot at NHL expansion with their current building, the Sprint Center, but talks have reduced considerably since 2007. A little bit of background on this city. When the WHA merged with the NHL, it seemed like the Jets, Whalers, Oilers, Nordiques, Birmingham Bulls, and Cincinnati Stingers were going to enter the NHL. However, the Bulls and Stingers were both paid to disband, as the WHA wanted the 3 Canadian clubs, specifically the Jets, Oilers, and Nordiques, to enter the National Hockey League. The proposal was made for those aforementioned teams and the New England Whalers, and after a second vote, the NHL voted 14-3 for the merger, and the Stingers were paid $1.5 million, which today, adjusted for inflation, is about $5.1 million. Since then, Cincinnati hasn't really been in talks for an NHL franchise, and with the addition of the Columbus Blue Jackets in the year 2000, it's unlikely they'll ever get a team. They do, however, have an ECHL franchise for Nashville, the Cincinnati Cyclones. Hamilton, Ontario has constantly been in the NHL expansion or relocation conversation throughout their history. They were a part of multiple expansion attempts in the 1990s, but those also fell through. In 2006, BlackBerry founder Jim Balsillie tried to buy the Penguins, but later retracted after certain conditions. He later tried to buy the Nashville Predators, but the Predators were sold to a group that eventually kept the team in Tennessee. A different group tried to buy the Atlanta Thrashers, who were ultimately bought by True North, who moved the team to Winnipeg. It is very unlikely given the market proximity that Hamilton will get a team, but the city remains in conversations. In 1995, the Quebec Nordique moved to Denver, Colorado. What makes Quebec City's story perhaps the most interesting one is that it seems kinda inevitable. So many pieces and conditions have been met, yet they still don't have a team. They even have a suitable venue in the Videotron Center, this $370 million arena that is currently home to the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League's Quebec Remparts. Ask most people who they think should get the next NHL franchise, most people are going to respond with Quebec City. So why hasn't it happened? Well, the market would be the second smallest in the NHL, just ahead of Winnipeg, but behind Buffalo. It would be the fourth smallest market to have a major pro sports team if you include the CFL, just ahead of Regina, Saskatchewan, and Green Bay, Wisconsin, along with the aforementioned Winnipeg. But market size can be circumvented if there's enough avid fans, which Quebec City most likely would have. The second issue, and I'd argue the greater issue, is the Canadian dollar in tandem with said market size. The primary reason the Quebec Nordique moved in the 1990s was the issue with the Canadian dollar, and in 2015, Quebec City came fairly close to being awarded a team with Las Vegas. Ultimately, the NHL passed on it because they viewed the Canadian dollar as slightly weaker at the time. The wording the league used was, quote, they deferred it, which may indicate some interest by the league. I think Quebec City is a when, not an if at this point, but ultimately, again, we will see. In 1997, the city of Norfolk, Virginia were almost considered for an NHL team after their local Hampton Roads Admirals were successful in the ECHL. The expansion fee of the NHL was relatively low at the time as well. The team was dubbed the Hampton Roads Rhinos. However, the NHL decided against expanding to Norfolk as the league was trying to avoid having too many teams in the East. Also, their proximity to the capitals was troubling, not to mention the size of Norfolk just wasn't an exciting prospect for the league. But enter Peter Karmanos, the owner of the then Hartford Whalers, who was considering moving the team to Norfolk but ultimately chose Raleigh, North Carolina. And by doing that, killed any chance of a team ever moving to Norfolk, as the area was now sandwiched between the Capitals and Hurricanes media markets. Norfolk did eventually get an American Hockey League team, the Norfolk Admirals, who eventually moved to San Diego to become the Gulls, but the Admirals' name now lives on through an ECHL franchise. And that's the list. Got any other cities worth talking about? Leave them in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.